The more that I grow into myself each and every day, the more I think about how many sensitive people or empaths are considered to be hypersensitive and really abnormal to society. They're going to be the ones that are abnormal. They're labeled abnormal, right? But I don't think that that's actually the case. I think that the more that I grow into my intuition and I acknowledge my instincts, the more normal that I become. And something that I was thinking about as I wanted to make this topic was the topic of death and what exactly entails with death and why you're not really doing anything wrong just because you feel disconnected from society. I put out a poll in my YouTube community post the other day asking about what people are being challenged with, and definitely it was feeling disconnected from society being among the top. So I wanted to do a video about this and get the sense of who exactly it is that I'm speaking to and why I need to speak to you right now, because this video is going to be for whoever needs to hear it. And I think this is going to be a very confirmational type of video. You're not abnormal for being able to be in tune with who you are. You're not doing something wrong just because you feel like you can't really fit in anywhere. You're not doing something wrong just because you feel as though you may not have any friends, you may not have much family. That doesn't always mean you're doing something wrong. Now, you might be the common denominator in all those situations and subjects, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that you are doing something that is incoherent to living a life of godliness. And that's what we're striving for here on this channel, is to live a life of godliness. And something I realized today was that the 10 Commandments are a map. They're not just like, there's a reason that we are to follow the 10 Commandments. It's because they're a map to enlightenment. They're a map to self-realization. They're a map to growing ever closer to God. And that's the way to do it. Well, society seems to think nowadays, especially because we live in the age of Babylon, really, because this is another weird thing. People think that what happened in the Bible was in the past. It's a metaphor and a symbol as well as history. The Bible is a living document, and there's a reason for this. There's a reason why you can read certain passages in the Bible and it's like, wow, that can be applied to today really easily. Well, it's because true wisdom is timeless. True wisdom lasts eternally. There's something that is going to be, like, think about timeless music as well. There's a reason why there's such a thing as timeless music, because it speaks to your soul in a way that you don't really even comprehend yourself. A lot of people at the time of these great artists or composers or whatnot, they weren't even known until after they died, right? Well, why is that? Well, it's partially because the collective consciousness and the people that shared that common life at the time couldn't acknowledge the greatness of the individual. And so this is something else, that I've been thinking about. A great man might only have 50 followers or subscribers or whatever, and he might think less of himself than some woman who has maybe 100,000 followers or subscribers or whatever, but she's not giving anything meaningful to society. She's giving her body. She's giving her beauty, and that's all that God gave her. But that man that has maybe 50 followers or whatever, he maybe provides more value to those 50 people than the 100,000 people that woman could ever give. And that is where we have to remind ourselves that our value does not come by quantity. It comes by quality. And this obviously, numbers are going to speak for themselves, and our minds go to the place of, well, if they have a certain number of whatever, then it's likely going to be that this is their results, right? And that's true. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that it may not be everything that it's cracked up to be. And a lot of these influencers and all of that, they're they're just so fake beyond belief at this point. I don't know how they have so many freaking, like, the couples. I'm sure you guys have seen those couples in TikTok or whatever. Or I don't really watch TikTok, but I've seen glimpses of the TikTok shorts that they put on YouTube for these couples. And you'll see these couples and you're just thinking to yourself, I am just so beyond this kind of superficiality and superfluousness that I just can't relate. Yeah, and it's not just with that. It's just with people that are interested in, maybe sports, or like, people get more hyped up about their fantasy football crap that they've got going on more than their own lives. And it reminds me of, you just keep the sheep distracted and they'll never see how the system is completely trying to destroy them. And I'm not ever going to really be quiet about this, because I know the difference between being in a simulation and being a part of the simulator. Being in the simulation, you're in the matrix. You're in the system and you don't even really know it. And then when you're with the simulator, I don't say you're in a simulator, even though you could see it that way, but I say with the simulator, because when you're with the simulator, you realize that you are co-creating with God. God made us in his image. We are his children for a reason, okay? We are meant to do great things. We are meant to be more than we already are. And God's on the side. Like, think about this, right? If you're feeling really disconnected from society and you know that you're God's child, because sometimes we feel like God's only children, right? I've made a video about this a long time ago called Feeling Like God's Only Child. But sometimes we do feel that way. Sometimes we do feel like God really only loves us. But that's just the I was going to say the immensity. Is that a word? Immensity? The immensity of his love that we feel in that moment. And it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling to have the immensity of his love and to feel like he gave you all of this hardship just to see what it was like to feel in general, just to feel, just to experience. Because at the end of the day, I tell people to only trust what they've experienced. And I've been thinking about death, right? I wanted to go back to this because this is where I was thinking about it at the very beginning of the video. I was thinking about the first time I really felt disconnected from society. It was when my grandma died when I was 17. At the time, I had a girlfriend in high school, and when I found out that my grandma died, the first thing that I did was I went to my girlfriend at the time, and I remember sitting in our truck, well, my truck, and we were there, and it was like our time, it was just our time. And the moment that we were just talking and a little bit, and I told her about my grandma dying, and it was a very strange feeling. I didn't feel sad about it until my girlfriend at the time started to cry. I didn't, like, she was more sad about my girlfriend was more sad about my grandma dying than I was. And I had this weird compassion for my girlfriend. I almost felt sad that she felt sad about my grandma dying. And I told her that I was going to be going to the funeral and whatnot, because it was a 5-hour drive at the time to go to the funeral, and funeral's going to be in a few days, etc. And so I'll be gone for a couple days, but I'll be back. And I remember that was one of the biggest moments that I had where I really started to feel like I'm not really afraid of death. Like I'm not really sad by death. Why is everybody else so saddened by death? And I didn't really understand why. I didn't understand what exactly is this about me that doesn't really seem sad about death. Because I was sad, but I wasn't up in arms about it. I wasn't just, I wasn't bawling like my girlfriend. And so anyway, we go down and it didn't really hit me. Like death really didn't hit me until I saw my grandma in the casket. Until I saw my grandma in the casket and I literally touched her hand because I just couldn't believe she died. Like I couldn't believe she was really dead. And I was like, this woman that I had known for my whole life, who, yeah, granted, did we have the best relationship? No, but I knew that like there were times where I felt genuinely loved by her, I felt like there were times when I was little, I was maybe 10 or 11, and we went to visit her and my grandpa, and before bed one night, I just couldn't sleep. And she would always check on us before she went to sleep, right? And she saw that I was still up. And I remember she was, just rubbing my back. And at the time, really growing up, my grandma was the only woman that would give me physical, like, touch as far as, like, actual affection. And it just felt so good, it felt so good. And so when I touched her hand and I remembered just those times where I felt that affection, and now to see her cold body, like it was lifeless, it was soulless, it was shocking. But it wasn't, I wasn't sad about it, I wasn't really sad. And then I looked around and I noticed that about 3/4 of the people were super sad. And then the other like 25% were super joyful, and because they knew that my grandma would want to just have us have a good time. And at least that's what we were telling ourselves. But nonetheless, that was one of the instances where I really started to feel like the disconnect in society was really starting to make a difference. And it wasn't like I was apathetic to death. It was just that I was not really feeling the concern, I suppose. But I was still sad. I was still very sad. But again, I wasn't attached to it in the way that even my girlfriend was at the time, So, all this is going to say that I think one of the ways that we can get beyond this feeling of disconnection is to accept death. And it's to accept the reality of death. And if nobody's ever read this book, The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker, I highly recommend it. It's very fascinating. This is a very psychological read. It's written by somebody that knows the history of psychology very well. And it's a very, very awe-inspiring book because it goes into Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung and Adler and all these other psychologists and their views of death, and like what exactly happens to people that deny death. And Ernest Becker also, I think he also has another book called like The Worm at the Core or something, and that's death. And this is why even in Genesis it says like what's the temptation to Eve? You shall not surely die. So Eve says, oh, I shouldn't surely die? Oh, interesting. Okay. So she's tempted with that. And it's like this temptation of immortality in a way that you might not even know before. So there's this newfound way of operating in the world when you accept death. When you really accept death and you accept that there's an impermanence rather, to to this life. There's an impermanence to life, and everything in of itself is going to be subject to change. Everything's subject to change, and there's nothing we can do about it, even our bodies. But our souls are eternal. Our souls are eternal, but people don't often understand what that means, right? People don't understand what that means, and that's another thing that's hard to feel when you're feeling disconnected to society. You're not doing anything wrong by thinking about these more abstract thoughts or these philosophical ideas or this existentialism. You're not doing anything wrong, but you can be a little bit neurotic or psychotic. Like, people can lose their mind a little bit. But sometimes you have to be a little crazy to get to the worm of the core, and to get past the denial of death. You've got to be a little crazy, because if you're not, you're going to let that thing consume you. You're going to let death consume you. And that's really not going to be any good for anybody at any point in time. So you want to make sure that you're actually living a life that is going to be understanding that death is going to come, and that not only death physically, but spiritual death is a possibility if you do not follow the commandments of God. If you do not follow the commandments of the Most High God, then there's a large possibility that you're going to be following into a pit of hell or despair. And instead of being a guest there, you're going to get a full-time membership to be in hell. And wouldn't recommend that, because I've been to hell, and it's not a very fun place. People say that hell and heaven are places, and that's true, but it's also a state of mind. It's also a place in your mind to some degree, because the universe is happening inside your mind. It's not happening out here. And most people, this is another reason why you feel disconnected to society, probably, is because you may not be able to articulate it, but you know that this world exists insofar as your mind is alive, so to speak. But because if your mind is off, are the lights on or is the light on, right? Those that know. But if the light is on and the lights are on, then that means that your consciousness is fully aware, you're fully awake, you're fully understanding, and you have this acknowledgement of something higher. You might not be fully committed to God just yet, but you know that there's something more. You know that there's something deeper. But it seems like most people are more infatuated with designer clothes and titles and status than spirit and truth. But the thing is we have to remember that it's very much more better for your soul to have fear for the Lord and to acknowledge his ways than it is to be lost in fake luxury, and to think that your repentance is the same as wishing your past away. Your past doesn't just get wished away. It's going to be with you until you die in this physical body. And that's just something that we're going to have to remedy for ourselves. But anyways, guys, I hope that this video was insightful for you and useful for you. I know that this has been something that many people are thinking about and pondering, so I wanted to make this video to support everybody that is feeling this way and going through this. I hope and I pray that it reaches to everybody that has eyes to see and ears to hear, that need to hear this kind of topic and need to see this kind of topic. So peace be with you all. Until next time.